Hey everybody, today we are looking at the Doepfer A-140 ADSR envelope generator. Alright, so at first glance, this module is pretty straightforward and simple, but I still think there's a few useful things to know, so I'm going to walk you through the core functions and share a few interesting use cases and some of the cool and beneficial things about this particular envelope generator. This episode is brought to you by the Colorado Modular Synth Society, the coolest place on the interwebs to hang out with other cool people who are also into synthesizers. What could be better than that? To start off walking through the core functions, we have a gate up here, which is again simple gate input, which will trigger the envelope. You can have your 4 ADSR settings here, so attack, decay, sustain, release. You have a retrig over here, which this is probably one of the most interesting functions of this envelope generator, is that basically your gate is going to start your envelope over, and then as long as your gate is live, it'll sit at the sustain mode. But retrig lets you basically kind of retrigger just the attack and decay, and it'll only come down to the sustain level. So instead of just retriggering the gate over and over again, you can kind of use the retrig. And what I'll show you is that that's really cool sound. What I find is for sending like LFOs or alternating things there, you can basically kind of really change the timbre of your note. If you're playing, for example, I'm going to be playing it through a filter, the Awesomeness through a filter. By using Retrig, you can really change the timbre of a note. So I'm going to share some demos of that shortly. Next, you've got two output settings. Literally, it's just going to give you a positive output of your envelope. And the second output, literally, the manual just says ditto. Self-explanatory. Inverse output is literally just your outputs. We're just going to go negative instead of positive in voltage. So again, really handy. I find that's really useful. I end up using this a lot. Last thing down here is time range, which is high, middle, and low. So high is going to be, this envelope could take minutes to resolve. Middle, that's probably closer to like 10 to 30 seconds. And low, that is a short, like really quick attack and decay release. So really kind of milliseconds there. So really useful, but it's pretty easy to switch through those. Okay, so to start off, I just have a really simple patch going. I just have a basically a gate signal going in here. And so up here on my scope, you can see the attack. I can kind of adjust that, make that longer. And obviously we have a longer attack. I can make my decay longer. Or I can make my decay shorter there. And then you see the sustain level. I can bring that up or down. There's a high sustain down to quite a low sustain here. And then the release is basically how long it takes once that sustain ends to actually come down. And so you can see I can kind of make it longer there or extremely short and just cut off. So that's all in the low time frame. So that gives you kind of a range of the scope. So pretty short on the low. And then if I go to the middle, you'll see that those same things start taking a lot longer. So, you know, my attack all the way up is a bit too long now. So now if I put my attack around 2, it's giving me what was previously about 10 on my attack. And so again, sustain will still function the same way, but my decay, maybe I'll want to slow that down a bit. And then my release, you'll see it's way longer. I can literally get through that whole gap now. We're almost where the next note starts. Really quickly, I'm going to quickly demonstrate the inverse output. If I literally just come down here, go to inverse output, and you're going to see there it is, literally the exact same wave just coming out the inverted. So we can literally put positive, negative at the same time. I find it really cool to kind of modulate bass or something with this, or you can use this as a sidechain compressor at times if you want to kind of get things to pump a bit. So really useful features for the inverse output, and then you don't have to run it through a whole attenuator and kind of take up a whole nother kind of segment of your rack. All right, so let me do some quick audio demos of this, and then I'm going to eventually hook up and show you the retrig function, which I think is the most interesting part of this module. So I'm going to bring up my cutoff frequency. So I've got basically the output of this envelope. It's running through my scope so you guys can see it. And then I have it running into the CV of this particular envelope, which I have as this EFI envelope. And then I've got a Manus Ateritas, which is basically the sound source. So again, we can start to see that kind of coming through here. So we can get that kind of like, wow. I'll make my decay a little slower, make my sustain higher. That's with no release. Automatic cutoff. There, or we can make. So yeah, that's kind of messing with the release there. So pretty cool, little simple sounds you can do there. So now what I want to show you is what happens when you start getting something into the retrig. So As I mentioned, the retrig, the way it works is when the gate is on, then you're basically going to, the retrig will go trigger the attack and decay sequence over and over again as often as it's re-triggered. And then it'll only come down to sustain, versus if you were just starting the gate over and over again, you would literally go through the whole cycle each time, or it would kind of interrupt itself, but it would kind of drop below the sustain. So I find, again, it'd be really useful. So let me play this here, and let me just start to kind of mess with it. I'm going to put in basically an LFO into this. So there we go with this, like, really, I have maths over here triggering it. So that's like a really fast. Kind of go a little slower, kind of get it rhythmic. Or I can, again, come all the way down to this. You get like this really cool sound. If I bring down the sustain, it'll make it an attack and decay. So again, you can see how this creates some really interesting sounds. And I like, honestly, getting at that kind of like rhythmic level there. And if I bring sustain up, it almost kind of like minimizes the effect because you're kind of smashing it out. If I put sustain all the way, ideally wouldn't even really be hearing it. But again, so some really cool stuff. And then, like, what I like is, so I've got just a sequence running from my pamps. Now I can modulate that. So you can see, just like, this is something where I can just kind of like really mess with the timbre of it a lot. And get something that otherwise would be kind of hard to pull off. It would be hard to do this specifically with that, just one piece there. So again, that's without me modulating it and stuff. So that's just flat, but again. So again, just really cool things. The retrig, that is probably one of the coolest features of this. So that's all I'm going to cover in this video, really. Again, this is a pretty straightforward, simple module, but it's powerful to have in your rig. Love the retrig function. That's something that you don't get in a lot of other envelopes. And so I think taking advantage of that, you can do some really interesting, unique things with it. Love, you can just kind of mess with the timbre of a note and everything with that as well. So I highly recommend picking yourself up a Doepfer A-140 ADSR envelope generator. Great little module here. It is a core, it is basic at its function, but it is useful, and I guarantee you'll get some power out of that and use that retrig function and make some cool timbres or CV there.